Hey survivors and thrivers, it's sophilialarkwoodbury of thehappymedium.com. Today I'm going to teach you 4 top things that I would do if I were just starting my healing journey through complex PTSD. Be sure to continue watching to get all of the details on how you can access my free trauma recovery mini course that will help you to build on what I'm going to teach today. For the best trauma recovery tips, tools, and strategies, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell so that you'll never miss a video when I upload new content every single Wednesday. Hey there everybody, welcome back. If this is your first time here, I am a trauma survivor, a licensed professional counselor, certified clinical trauma specialist, and trauma recovery coach, helping people and organizations resolve the effects of trauma and build resilience. So maybe you've recently realized that you actually suffer from complex trauma and symptoms of complex PTSD, and you want to know, where do I begin to start moving toward a more fulfilling life, to heal myself? Here's what I would recommend. The first thing is to begin to create safety for yourself. Now, safety means emotional stability as well as physical and social stability and safety. That means that you are examining your tendencies to recreate trauma or chaos in your life. So how do you know if you're creating safety or you're recreating trauma? It typically comes in the form of examination, self-examination, if you will. So one of the things that survivors of complex trauma typically have trouble with is being able to determine whether or not they put themselves in situations that can create harm. So let's say, for instance, you seek dangerous situations or dangerous people. Maybe you go to places alone by yourself at night, and it's not really a conscious thing. It's what it's called repetition compulsion, where a person sort of unconsciously put themselves in dangerous situations, whether it's physical situations, emotional situations, or social situations. And so the person isn't really aware of that. You know, so in psychoanalytic parlance, the goal is to make the unconscious conscious. So how do we become conscious of whether or not we're creating that safety? Well, we ask those questions. Do I attract people who are dangerous? Am I always going somewhere where I don't really even know anybody? You know, and be honest about these questions. How are your relationships typically, your current relationships? Do you have relationships that are chaotic, that are abusive, unpredictable? You don't know whether or not, you know, there's going to be a fight, or if there's going to be flight, or if there's going to be, you know, a cordial interaction. Those are some of the basic questions that you can ask, but it's really in your actions. Making sure that places where you go, the areas are well lit, you have clear access to doors and things like that. You don't have this sense of being trapped. It's looking for those kinds of things to determine whether or not that you're creating safety or you're recreating trauma in your life. Another thing that I would do if I were just starting my healing journey is to learn about and start practicing ways to shrink the inner and the outer critics. So the inner critic is an internal voice. It's a voice that you developed in response to your parents or your caregivers' rejection to you, their abandonment of you, their contempt with you in early life. And it really was their voice, their response, their tone, maybe their style of communication, or maybe it was a look that they gave you that communicated to you that what you did was not only unacceptable, but that you were particularly disgusting. And I know that that is harsh, but that's how the inner critic really starts to develop. And so you then essentially, when you become an adult, you take on your parents' awful legacy of projecting self-hate. And so then you start to say their words. Or even the inner critic develops, it evolves over time. So I know I often hear sometimes people may say, well, I hear things in my head that my mom never said, or that my dad never said, or whoever that raised me. And I tell them that the inner critic grows. It doesn't just stay stagnant. It doesn't stay really the same as when we were a child. It grows, it evolves. So it may be your thinking combined with your parents' thinking, combined with the thinking and the behaviors in society, and it becomes this monster. And so now you're hearing things, all kinds of criticisms that maybe, yeah, your mom or your dad or your caregiver never said to you, or maybe they never looked at you in that particular way. But because the inner critic has the tendency to evolve, there are going to be new things that maybe you didn't hear them say before. But the point is not to focus on the new things that you've never heard them say before. The nuance is that the inner critic is something that developed in response to how they treated you, your parents treated you in childhood. And so it's there because of them. Now, regardless of what it's doing now, just know that it's there because of them. And because it's been allowed to grow, you are now taking on that voice for yourself, and you're doing their dirty work of calling yourself names, putting yourself down, those kinds of things. The outer critic is very similar in the sense that it's not really about you really focusing in on everything that's wrong with you. It's more about focusing in on everything that's wrong with everybody else. So these people are the worst people in the world because they can never be on time. It's really this whining beyond, it's whining on steroids. It's complaining. It's about seeing the wrong and just everything that happens to you with really no filter, no ability to parse out that something there could be an alternative explanation for why something doesn't seem right to you about whatever the situation is, whether it's a person, place, or thing. And so that's really how you can think about the inner and the outer critic. Now, what you can do to stop the inner and outer critics, to shrink those so that they almost become unrecognizable, or they may come up, but you say, no, you're not coming in here. Is through you can do thought stopping, you can do thought correcting, kind of what I just showed you here just a second ago. Is that the critic comes up and you go, nope, I don't think so. Thank you for that. I don't need your input. I know how to think for myself now. I don't have to hear that voice anymore. You no longer belong here. And you can correct that by gathering the evidence and say, actually, that's just an opinion. Actually, that's just what I feel. That doesn't mean, I don't jump to what that emotion means to me, my interpretation of it. I stick with the feeling. I stick with calling a thing, calling the emotion an emotion. I'm really frustrated by that. I'm really disappointed in that. See, you're sticking with the feeling. You're not going, that is the stupidest person I've ever seen in my life. Look how dumb they are. And you're saying that because of the emotion. You feel disappointed in somebody or angry with them. And instead of saying, I'm really frustrated or angry with this person, you start to call them names. And so when you're able to really distinguish between letting the emotion be what it is and feeling that without jumping to an interpretation, you really start to shrink the inner and the outer critic. And so that's what I would recommend that you start to learn. Something else that is very necessary for healing, and I think this is probably the most important thing, is allowing yourself to mourn. Now, I want to say this before I jump into what I want to say about the differences between single event traumas and repeated trauma, is that grief is not quick and it's not on anybody's timeline. So nobody gets to tell you how long it takes to heal. They're not on your journey, and so they don't get to tell you when it begins or when it ends. But here's the thing about grief. Grief happens over time, little by little. And it's so gradual that you just have to allow yourself to take in whatever you're starting to learn about your trauma. So it's sort of making a little progress and you're stopping to absorb it. Now, unlike single event trauma, so traumas such as, the loss of a career, maybe you lost a home or in a natural disaster, or maybe there was a sudden loss of a loved one, which would be considered traumatic loss. Those things are horrific in their own right. And so I don't mean to minimize any of that. But unlike those single event traumas, repeated trauma is often harder to recognize, it's often even harder to describe, because the people who've suffered them often don't even know that they've experienced such loss. Loss of a sense of safety, the loss of the ability to trust other people, the loss of innocence, the lack of an identity, the loss of a worldview, the basic philosophy of life, to be able to even say, why am I here? What's the meaning of my life? They don't really have those things. And it's only when they go through the healing process, through therapy or support groups that really target, reconnecting the entire self, that the person begins to realize the developmental loss, that loss over time. And then they start to realize that they've lost so much, because the things that they didn't get to do, the skills that they didn't get to develop because they were busy surviving. That's when the grief starts. That's when they become aware that they've suffered tremendous loss. And so getting to that point has to take time in order for you to be able to properly grieve. And the final thing is to begin building new relationships, new opportunities, and new practices based on the full story of your life. So now you've learned how to narrate the full story of your life, not just the trauma part. So you're no longer in the position of bracing yourself for a threat. You now know that you've already survived this. And now you're on the other side of it, where you get to build this whole new life for yourself that maybe you once only dreamed about, or maybe that you've never dreamed about. So maybe this is the time now to start dreaming of what you're going to do with the rest of your life. The goal is to put a concrete plan in place. So, I would develop this with somebody, a therapist, or your best friend who's very reliable and supportive, maybe an accountability partner, a support group. Maybe they do things like this to help people develop their life plans moving forward. Whatever you do, put in those plans things that maybe you've dreamed of, or maybe you're like, wow, what can I do with my life? Maybe you want to go to college for the first time, or maybe you want to go back to college. Maybe you want to pursue a new career, take on new hobbies or leisure activities. Go to Disney World for the first time. I know that I went to Disney World for the first time when I was 30 years old. And for me, I never thought I would do that. I realized that I had all kinds of opportunities and possibilities ahead of me. I started building the life I desired. And this is what happens when you experience integration, when you're able to tell all the story of your life and not just be focused on that trauma part, the part that's driving your current reality. When you're healed from that, when you put trauma in its proper perspective, which is in the past, it happened, I already survived it. So now I'm just going to move forward. I'm not going to keep dwelling on that. I don't have to, because I know the truth now. This is what I would do to really heal myself and keep myself on that recovery journey once I go through this full process. So guys, take this, apply it however you want, and I hope the best for your recovery and healing. And let me know in the comments how things are working out for you. So now you have a basic plan for how you can jumpstart your recovery process. And if you want to go deeper and build on what you learned today, be sure to get your hands on my free trauma recovery mini course. You can access that course by clicking the link below in the description. If you're looking for an uplifting community where you can gain access to spiritual approaches to healing complex PTSD, be sure to join me on Instagram, where I share uplifting content that speaks to the spiritual aspects of healing. All right, guys, well, thank you so much for joining me today. If this video was helpful for you, be sure to show some love by giving it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and drop a comment below to let me know your biggest takeaway today. And don't forget to subscribe by hitting that subscribe button. Click that notification bell so that you'll never miss a video when I upload new content every Wednesday. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day. Bye-bye.